Good morning, folks. We've got news from the ground out into space in all the key areas of coverage. We're looking at a plasma filament growing now as it exits our viewing perspective, so let's start with our star over at spaceweathernews.com. We're finding very quiet conditions. Still no sunspots, no eruptive activity, and the X-ray flux is showing that solar flaring remains asleep, flatlined. The active regions have been in decay, so focus in that realm comes to the eastern limb where more umbral fields are visible incoming. Solar wind here. Telemetry shows the stream continues dropping intensity as speed returns to normal and geomagnetic conditions are all green. The solar wind from this coronal hole will arrive within a day or two, increasing the intensity. Next one is incoming top left. The quake watch is muted because the coronal hole is still showing very weak power output, so we come to find modest lithospheric events only, and in somewhat rarer locations than usual, especially the foreshocks near Africa. Mount Shinmodake went off again as well in Japan, and we'll have to keep watch there, especially as ash and smoke are in travel lanes for airplanes. You might recall that a Tunguska-sized asteroid was to zip between the Earth and Moon just outside of Earth's orbit. It indeed did so last night, as seen by one amateur astronomer here from Australia. Little rock flew by and it's heading for the southern half of the solar system. Wanted to share this ESA image. Their shot of the week is a stretch across the galactic plane. It uses a combination of Planck and apex data. Up next is our top story. We've long known Enceladus water volcano plumes distribute the life liquid across the Saturnian system, but now a revisitation of the Galileo data reveals something similar at Europa, another water world with oceans and many of the materials for life, only this time it's a moon at a planet much, much closer to Earth than Saturn. The Europa Clipper mission is firing and preparing to go directly search for life around Jupiter. Last but not least, folks, that galaxy without dark matter from last month. These physicists have had about enough of this dark matter charade. This is only 3 pages, it is not at all complex, and the last paragraph pretty much sums up the current state of science, and it goes far beyond the cosmological paradigm they're addressing here. We've got your wind maps and shots of our star to close. Greatly appreciate your support. Website memberships are how we do this every day. We'll do this all again tomorrow, right here, but right now it's 4:55 a.m. in the new Valley of the Sun. Eyes open, no fear. Be safe, everyone.
My name is H.A. Goodman, and I'm an author, columnist, and journalist. Please go ahead and share my latest article in the Daily Caller below. Free Julian Assange. I will be starting a new channel devoted to appreciation and love and enjoyment of the Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights. You can't just simply pick and choose the freedoms and rights that are written within the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Every American should enjoy every aspect of the Bill of Rights. Anyway, that channel will be up within, I'd say about a week and a half. Maybe sooner. This is really important. Mueller team urges federal judge to reject request for hearing on leaks. So, what took place just recently, just the other day is that Paul Manafort's lawyers said, look, we know that there were leaks to all these different media corporations. So let's see if there was one. Okay, so I think there's a Bloomberg article that lists all the publications and... Oh, okay, so... I love this. He hasn't even... Mueller refutes Manafort's claim of grand jury leaks by government. That's not a refutation. This is... Okay, so... He doesn't refute. He acknowledges, but says it's not that big of a deal. Because he's Mueller. Mueller time! He's all-powerful and will not stand for anyone questioning his power and authority. Even though today we found out from John Solomon of The Hill that he's linked to a Russian oligarch. I did a segment on that. Check a couple segments prior to this one. Okay. So Robert Mueller acknowledges, the Mueller team, the U.S. government acknowledges that the Associated Press, the New York Times, CNN, NBC News, and BuzzFeed all were a part of leaks from the United States government. These leaks are linked to the Obama administration. I'll get to that in a second. But okay, and then you have James Comey, who leaked his queasy memos. Mind you, this is not whistleblowing. So it's all convoluted, and there's obviously nothing that Mueller is doing. There's no Trump-Russia collusion. It's just nonsense. They're trying to throw as much mud as they can because they think that if they do so, people will look at Hillary Clinton's real crimes in a relative manner, which is what's taking place. So they've been successful thus far in convincing people who would never have voted for Trump to begin with, which really doesn't help them in terms of any election. They're going to lose the House. So, the Associated Press, the New York Times, CNN, NBC News, and BuzzFeed. Let's say that, okay, this can take down Mueller. Peter Strzok's text message, if Trump just tweets it every day, will take down Mueller in a second. Oh, we have to engage in an insurance policy. We can't take the risk of Trump being president. But how did the Associated Press, the New York Times, CNN, NBC News, and BuzzFeed get information, grand jury information, from grand jury information regarding the Manafort case, or the case against Manafort? That is a very valid request. You already had a judge striking down, or at least expressing his opinion that Mueller has restraints. He can't simply just look into Manafort's past just because he wants to and find any alleged crime, when in reality all he wants to do is take down Trump. So even the judge just recently said, hey, you just want to take it down, you just want to take down Trump. But let's just look at a very famous leak. So Jake Tapper, Steele dossier. Mentions CNN. Clapper told... Okay, so James Clapper spoke to CNN about the Steele dossier. James Clapper's Steele dossier testimony may have been false. Let's just go back to the Steele dossier. Very likely, leaks regarding Manafort will go all the way back or correlate to James Clapper, former ODNI chief. This is a National Review article. Clapper may have lied to Congress about the Steele dossier leak. James Clapper may have misled Congress regarding his contacts with the media during his tenure as the Director of National Intelligence, according to a report on Russian election meddling released by congressional Republicans Friday. Clapper initially told the House Intelligence Committee, which produced the report, that he had no contact with the media. Of course, this now... Oh my God, give me a break. Okay. That he had no contact with the media regarding the infamous Steele dossier during his time serving in the Obama administration. So it all... If you're not talking about Clapper, you're talking about Brennan. If you're not talking about Brennan, you're talking about Mother Jones journalists who were integral in the Steele dossier as well. So Clapper initially told the House Intelligence Committee, which produced the report, that he had no contact with the media regarding the infamous Steele dossier during his time serving in the Obama administration. Clapper later admitted that he had discussed the dossier with CNN's Jake Tapper after lawmakers confronted him. Didn't speak to the media? Well, yeah, I did. So this is not the first time he's lied. He's lied under oath about the NSA collecting information about Americans. Now, if you have a person who's leaking information regarding Manafort's case in the U.S. government while Trump is president, then that person very likely has ties, or either is beholden or has ties to, or was in the DOJ or in the intelligence community during President Obama's tenure, or at least has an allegiance towards the Democratic Party in some way if they're trying to take down Manafort, just to have him sing and spin. Clapper is just one example. That person, let's say you have a whole bunch of people who were leaking information, very possibly or very likely can be tied to James Clapper, who lied about his contacts in the media regarding the Steele dossier. But it's not just James
double standard in not just media, but also in justice, where Dinesh D'Souza gets charged with campaign finance violations, very minor, very small amount. You could tell it wasn't his intention. He has to face the full extent of the law. Then Rosie O'Donnell, I would say, does the exact same thing, but that would be a lie. What Rosie O'Donnell did was actually worse. Rosie O'Donnell actually engaged in fraud as well as campaign finance violations. But where is the news attacking Rosie O'Donnell? Where is the Justice Department going after Rosie O'Donnell? Roger Stone, you have seen a lot as far as political campaigns, campaign finance donations, and of course what ends up being people violating that law. You've probably seen that a lot in your past, but have you ever seen a more blatant double standard than that applied to Dinesh D'Souza and that not applied to Rosie O'Donnell?
No, Owen, it's really quite extraordinary. Look, giving through straw donors is illegal. Robert Brennan, a New Jersey Republican, famously went to prison for this in the 80s. Dinesh D'Souza was charged by U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara, who now, oddly enough, is under consideration to be appointed Attorney General to fill the vacancy caused by the resignation of New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. So why is the law not being evenly applied here? Why was Dinesh D'Souza crucified for this campaign finance violation when Rosie O'Donnell gave larger amounts by more donors, but remains, free and not under the same kind of scrutiny or federal indictment that Bharara charged D'Souza with? This is the stunning hypocrisy of the political establishment and the left, Owen. You know what? And now I'm sitting here and I'm recalling, wasn't
wasn't Bahara just exposed for doing something illegal too? It's skipping my mind. I bet the crew could find it. What Bahara was just exposed.
I can address this for you. Preet Bahara was found by a federal judge to have leaked grand jury testimony to the media. This is not an accusation or a charge. This was a tongue lashing he got from the judge in the William Walters case. Then he compounds it by speaking to a forum in Las Vegas, and when asked about it, he lies. This is the man that is under consideration to be appointed Attorney General of New York. Guess again. So you have two stunning acts of misconduct by Mr. Bahara, the charging of Dinesh D'Souza, and in my opinion, the far more serious charge that he leaked grand jury testimony in violation of the law.
Well, it sounds like the exact type of person the New York Democrats would want to follow up in the footsteps of the disgraced Eric Schneiderman. You know, one criminal out, next criminal in. Sounds right up their alley, Roger.
Well, the other thing I can tell you, Owen, is that the lawsuit against me and President Trump filed by the Project for Democracy will have a hearing on Thursday in which my attorneys and the attorneys for the president's campaign will argue for dismissal. Now, as I have said previously, this lawsuit is completely frivolous. They claim that I worked with, stop me if you've heard this, the Russians to hack the DNC and give the emails to WikiLeaks. This is a left-wing conspiracy theory, and those who are bringing this action provide no evidence or any proof. They merely point to fake news stories that they themselves have generated. It's an abuse of the system. The media is already contacting me to cover this hearing, which is a Thursday at 1:30 p.m. In courtroom 23A of the D.C. District Court. So I urge those in the alternative media to be there for these crucial arguments while we dismantle this suit. Now, this should not be confused with the Democratic...
Behind me, what you see is activity going on at Kilauea's summit right now. Since the lava lake receded deep into the volcano, we have had a continual emission of vigorous steam from the conduit that has been evacuated of lava deeply into the volcano. In addition, we've had rock falls down into that steep conduit, which sometimes cause the updraft of ashy material that mixes with the steam and forms a discolored, brownish, sometimes pinkish plume. This morning's plume is a little bit larger than those that we've been seeing and may indicate the addition of some fresh lava streaming through the rubble pile at the bottom. That's just a preliminary interpretation, but something we're considering. So far, we have not seen any evidence of these overpressured, steam-driven explosions, which is what we're worried about in the long run here at the summit of Kilauea. So just to emphasize, we have seen no evidence of that activity yet, but this is something we're watching for. Transitioning down to the lower East Drift Zone, I'd like to mention that overnight we had continued lava effusion from what we're calling Fissure 17, which is at the northeast end of the fissure system that has been active over now for many days. That fissure is producing lava fountains that are throwing spatter up more than 100 feet in the air. In addition, the lava flow is moving away from the fissure, generally in an easterly direction, paralleling Highway 132, but south of Highway 132. The lava flow has moved just about a mile from the fissure overnight. It's starting to turn a little bit southerly, moving slowly, but we're watching it carefully, and USGS crews are in the field working closely with Hawaii County Civil Defense to make sure they are updated as quickly as possible about the position of lava and the areas that it may threaten. There are a couple of other fissures in the system that are weakly active at this time to the southwest of Fissure 17, and we're also keeping track of those. That's the update from Kilauea today.
All right, everyone, it's time for me to weigh in on that trickiest of topics, which is the Israel-Palestine dust-up, which has been happening constantly since, the fucking 1940s or 50s, I think. So it's been a long time that there's non-stop, low-level simmering warfare within the region. Very, very sad. Here's my thoughts. It's in 3 parts because you have to take these separately. Some people are conflating everything in the region together because they get really, really self-righteous because of usually religious reasons, and they either say, I'm 100% with Israel, they should do whatever they want, or they say, I'm 100% with the Palestinians, screw the Israelis, and they take up a very absolutist black and white sort of argument. I don't do that because I see that it's more complex than that. So the first part is that Haaretz, this is not part of the conflict there itself, or part of the embassy move. They declared that the Israeli government was alt-right. I thought to myself, just as an aside, how funny it was that they're declaring a bunch of Jews now to be Nazis as well. So you do realize Haaretz does not appear to understand that it's actually itself making the same claim as some people within the alt-right. Oh yeah, they're the real Nazis because look at how they're treating this, open-air ghetto, basically, of Gaza. Okay, you're making the same argument as the people that you're calling out the Israeli government as, despite being generally in favor of the Jewish people, because Haaretz is, I believe, predominantly a Jewish publication. Okay, that's a really, really confusing situation. I don't quite understand it, dude. It's like, yeah, I'm critical of the Israeli government plenty, but that doesn't make them alt-righters. That makes them imperialistic, actually. Therefore, more like a Merkelite globalist. Silent imperialism, that's what you should call it. Second is the embassy move itself. The embassy move to Jerusalem by the United States that was enacted, which is sort of in the lead up to this latest round of violence. The move itself was proposed and codified in 1995. It's nothing contemporary. It's from last generation, essentially. Back when MTV was still relevant, back when Clinton was in office. You have to go through 2 entire 2-term presidencies and half of Clinton's presidency before you get to the modern era, from when this was already codified by Congress. They had already passed the resolution to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move the embassy there in 1995. But the U.S. government never had the balls to actually do it. The President of the United States, sworn up to enact the actual proposal, never had the balls. Clinton never had the balls because he didn't want to raise the specter of increased violence there. He didn't want it to become a campaign issue, probably. Oh, this might have a drag on my approval if millions of people die over in a regional war, so I think that I'm going to avoid this right now. And then W came along and he just didn't have balls, even though he was probably in favor of it. And then Obama comes along and I don't even think he was in favor of the concept of moving the embassy. I think he's come out and condemned the concept, oh, this will lead to violence or whatever. Okay, okay, there's violence already in the region. What more need you know? But then we have to get to the third part of the situation, which is the specific killing of certain Palestinians. I believe 58 dead now and several hundred wounded at last. I believe that's what I saw last by the IDF. What happened is a group of Gazans got together, and there were rockets fired, stones, thrown, and sticks, beaten against trash can lids, and the usual stuff that goes on anytime something slight happens on either side of the fence in Gaza. And the IDF opened fire and killed a bunch of people. I condemn this. And I can condemn this it's a mystery to certain people how you can condemn the IDF butchering a bunch of innocent civilians, which appears to be largely what was killed here. It's a mystery to them how you can do that and still support Israel's right to exist. They take up an either-or sort of stance. Oh, well, if you support Israel's right to exist and don't want to Holocaust the entire population there, you have to let the IDF do exactly whatever they want. No, there are other options open, like, act like a standardized first world nation that Israel is. Act within the boundaries of normal national behavior like most countries choose to do. Meanwhile, we've got a situation, this was pointed out. You got a situation where some cop opens fire with non-lethal weapons on a horde of people that are rioting in like the borderlands of Europe during the height of their migrant crisis. International condemnation, evil bigot, they must be fired, probably they need to be put in jail, horrible, the country must apologize, terrible, violating human rights. a bunch of Palestinians are killed, despite the fact that it appears, again, most of them were unarmed civilians. They're not Hamas members. They're not actually firing rockets. They're just civilians sitting there chanting. Nobody cares. The same sort of people don't care. I find that very, very strange. I find that condemnable as well. Like I told Fuentes, I support Israel's right to exist. I do not support its right to steadily encroach upon, destroy its neighbors, attack civilians, and try to make the Palestinians not exist. Generally speaking, in the general weight of things, I side more with the civilians of Palestine than with any other actor. Not Hamas, not really the PLO, they're just inept. And I think the Israelis backed the PLO's existence until they didn't want to give up a bunch of land. The Israeli government is butcherous. You know, the Israeli civilians are the ones that have to suffer, by the way, when there are reprisals for this sort of thing. But when you manage like Gaza, it's basically an open-air ghetto. It's been blockaded for years, and there's critical shortages of every supply. And then you claim, oh, well, anytime we send supplies, Hamas takes them. Well, don't you think after decades of trying this, you could try something different that's more humane? You know, it's not like Israel's going to stop existing because a couple Palestinians threw rocks. These aren't Hamas. They're not terrorists. Most of these people are civilians, and they're pissed off. Rightfully so. They think Jerusalem belongs to Palestine. Don't you see why they'd be upset? You know, as far as I'm concerned, Jerusalem should belong to the United States. We should carve it into a microstate, put a big base there, and then manage the whole region directly, since it's obvious nobody else can do so. It's obvious at this point that the two governments, the PLO and the Israeli government, are never going to pledge themselves to peace, don't want to get along, and primarily just want to use one another as target practice. Okay, well then maybe Big Brother should step in. Maybe a country that's capable of running the region should step in. You know, return to the Pax Romana or something like that. Get Italy involved. Let the Vatican run it. So, there are Christians in there. Okay, the Pope's private army's marching in. We're tired of this shit. You know, we got to defend these churches from being hit by rockets. Do something about it. But as far as the embassy move, no, as far as that, it was already, Congress already put that through in the 90s. It doesn't really matter so much, but we do have to admit that it is what caused this latest round of protests, riots, and, bottle rockets being fired. By the way, and I will say, come on, there's a big difference between a bottle rocket without any sort of explosive potential fired by Hamas that hits the ground and does nothing, basically, and occasionally might damage something or kill someone, which is regrettable, but sporadic, because they can't aim them. There's a big difference between that and using like a cluster bomb over a crowded metropolitan area dropped by any of a number of U.S. supplied aircraft that are fielded by Israel. It's a big difference. Israel has a standardized military and nuclear weapons. You're a nuclear state, a modern nuclear state. You've got thermonuclear weapons. It's like if North Korea wouldn't be compelled into thinking that its existence was at risk if a few 100,000 people started throwing rocks at their border wall. I don't think that they would care. Yeah, it's just not going to happen. Haaretz is a laughable article. I mean, it's funny. It's more a comedy piece than anything. I condemn, the Israeli military for its actions against Palestinian civilians. As far as the embassy goes, though, it's the U.S., by the way, we have the right to move our embassy there if we want to. That has nothing to do with even the Israeli government didn't make the decision, we did. And as far as the PLO or whatever condemning it, the Iranians getting upset, it's like, okay, well, keep your embassy in Tel Aviv then. Go ahead. We're moving it to wherever we fucking want to move it. I don't know that it's helpful. I don't know that it really is more than symbolic if it is helpful at all, but I mean, it is our right. We're a sovereign nation too. We can do that. We could also not have an embassy at all, like we do with. I don't think we don't have an embassy in North Korea. I don't think we have an embassy in Turkmenistan. You wouldn't dare to step outside. You'd probably get enslaved. Be a little bit of a problem. Plus, no internet access. It's like, yeah, I had to use a satellite card. I get internet for 2 hours every day at a really low dial-up level speed. Wonderful to work in this embassy. That's where you put your political opponents' kids that want to enter rungs of government. You're the ambassador to Turkmenistan. Congratulations! 6-figure salary you can't buy anything with. Maybe you can buy a bag of Durham weed or something. That's about all. Peace out.